welcome to everyone. And did we plan to go around and try to do any introductions, or since we're in this awkward scenario, how do we want to do this?
I think.
And say hi to Pete here.
No, I'm trying to be recognized.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I do think it would be helpful for me and for our recording to get a sense of who's in this virtual meeting. So yes, I would like to have a roll call and anybody that's on the phone.
Okay. So, well, that's, yeah. So Brenda, do you want to do some sort of roll call? I really have, and then I'll call the meeting to order after we kind of do our introductions, or, roll call so we know who's in the meeting.
Why don't I just, for efficiency's sake, read off the names that I can see, and then if I call your name, then you could let us know, because we have several people who are identified as callers 1, 2, 3, 4. So, we have Drew Pfefferly, Paul Thompson, Sid Schoaf, Andrew Martin, Ann Heath, AJ Jackson, Ann Collister, Carl Ye, Christine Lundberg, Pete Sorensen, Joe Pictionary, Ellen Courier, Franny Brindle, Jeff Kernan, Joe Burney, Kate Reed, Lucy Vinnis, Matt Rodriguez, Neil Moyer, Rachel Dorfman, Rob Innerfeld, Sam Kelly Quattrochi, Sasha Vartanian, Tom Boyat, and Tom Schwetz. So if I have not called your name, if you could let me know you're on the line. It looks like we have 7 callers on the line.
This is Ann Davies. I'll be presenting the Cable Commission item later. I'm on the line.
Great, thank you.
Nancy Newton, City of Springfield.
Emma Newman, City of Springfield. Becky Gilliam with the Safe Route Partnership.
What?
Becky Gilliam, Safe Routes. Any others on the phone?
Hi, who just joined us?
This is Sandra Bishop. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm going to keep it muted. I'm just a citizen listening in.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, and this is Kelly Clark. I just logged in.
Okay.
That should be it. That should be it.
That's it. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call the Metropolitan Policy Committee meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from May 7th, 2020.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is adjustments to the agenda or any announcements from MPC members. Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, Paul.
This is Paul. I think we will cover some of it when we talk about the LCDC meeting. There's a little bit of overlap, but I think that also myself and I believe Kate Reed could give a debrief on Monday's OMPOC meeting.
Okay, yes, great. Did you want to do that now or when somewhere else on the agenda?
I'd say we do it later because, again, we'll cover some of it as we talk about the LCDC item on the agenda, and then we can fill in the rest later.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so with no other additions, are there comments from the audience?
We did not have anyone sign up or let us know that they would like to provide comments.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the MPO issues. 6A is our CLMPO funding applications. And is it Dan giving us the report for that?
Yes, I'll be doing that.
Okay.
So this item is the funding proposal for FY 2022 to 2024 for the discretionary surface transportation block grant, transportation alternatives, and congestion mitigation air quality funding programs. So MPO receives federal funding each year to fund transportation projects every 2 or 3 years. We put together a new TIP, a transportation improvement program, where we program out multiple years of that funding for specific projects. The new TIP was adopted last month, covers the fiscal years of 2021 through 2024, and includes about $18.5 million of these discretionary funds that are yet to be awarded to projects. So we had a project solicitation. We received 23 applications. This item is presenting those proposals, those applications. The packet included those applications in a summarized form, one-page summaries for each of the 23 applications we received. The cover memo includes a link to those full applications if you're interested in reviewing those. But also this item presents a proposal for the funding of those projects that was prepared by the Transportation Planning Committee. That is on page 2 of the cover memo. So what we're asking for today is a public hearing on that proposal. This is out currently for a 30-day public comment period. TPC will make a final funding recommendation later this month, and we would ask for action at that at the next MPC. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this proposal or about the process. If you have questions about the specific projects, I defer to the local agencies. Are there any questions? I will just add that the proposal, it includes it's a 110% proposal. So we received requests that exceeded the amount that we have. It was 145% is the list that we started with. That was narrowed down to 110%. The idea is that there are a few of those projects that could utilize FY 2025 funding. So the proposal takes about nearly $2 million from 2025 that would be held in reserve to be used for those specific phases of those projects. So it's not strictly 2022 to 2024 funds that's being proposed.
So Dan, as part of maybe the public process going out, because even as someone who has seen this stuff for a long time, it's always a point of interest to me to realize, how did we get to this list? Because it's reviewed by more than one group before we get to this point. And what is the reasoning behind which projects are brought forward even at this point in time, and for the public's sake also, because they're going to have a chance to weigh in on the list that's been created.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So our project selection process follows the federal requirements. There are certain things we're required to consider, and then there are additional things that we consider because they're of importance as identified by MPC. We have certain criteria. So the regional primary funding considerations in our RTP that MPC has approved are projects that improve safety, that preserve existing transportation assets, to preserve or enhance transit services, and projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So when the group is reviewing these and looking at these projects, they're looking through it with that lens. How well do these projects meet those established priorities? And those are, each of those items I just listed are called out in the funding application. So the applicant has to specify how their specific project addresses those. Other considerations are, so the project needs to support the federal performance targets that we've adopted. Also, for use of CMAQ funds, any project selection is required to consider the PM10 emissions benefits of these projects and the cost effectiveness. How cheaply does it achieve those emissions benefits? So all of those are included in the applications for each of these projects. As the applications were submitted to me, I provided them to the technical advisory subcommittee who reviewed these applications before we were able to meet as a group and talk about them and strategize and discuss how well these things met our priorities. And what resulted from that was this prioritized list or proposals, probably a better way to say it.
Okay, great, thank you. Lucy?
Yes, thank you. I just, thank you for that explanation. Quick question. 3 of the items have an asterisk and I haven't seen where that is explained. What is the asterisk?
There are actually 4 of those items. Those are the point-to-point projects.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I put that simply because the future of point-to-point as a program is maybe not as solid right now as it was when the applications were submitted. So there may be someone else at this meeting who could speak to that with more authority than I could, but there is maybe more that goes into those projects than the others from an administrative perspective at this point.
Mayor Lundberg?
Yes.
I'll speak to that and one other comment. The reason we called those out is because, as Dan indicated, point-to-point may be under some transition, or rather than thinking of it specifically as point-to-point, it really is our regional transportation options program, which goes by the name point-to-point. And it may be undergoing some transition with some functions perhaps remaining in lane transit districts, some functions perhaps being occurring elsewhere. What the region staff have committed to and LCOG is committed to is that if these programs that have applied for funding are funded, they will be carried out, whether that's at Lane Transit District, perhaps at Lane Council of Governments, perhaps through some sort of regional partnership may still need to be determined, but they will be carried out.
Okay. Okay, great.
The other note I wanted to make, if I could, Mayor Lundberg, in response to your comment about just outlining for the public in general how these projects are arrived at. The only thing I'll add to what Dan said is, Mayor Lundberg, I know you've mentioned several times that these projects are submitted by the local jurisdictions as a result of their priorities, as a result of your local transportation system plans and your local deliberations that arrive at the priorities that you then want to apply for this regional funding for.
Yes. Well, I just think, as it goes out for the 30-day period, for the benefit of the public is to know why these projects, and if the public wants to weigh in on the appropriateness of any one of those projects, they would have that list of criteria to compare it to. So just in the, to be as, so people can understand from the public if they want to make comments, why the heck is this list the list?
Thank you. I can add that. Appreciate that.
Okay. Are there other comments or today we're, this is a public hearing today, and then it still goes out for a 30-day public comment period. Yes?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. So if there aren't any more questions at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone wants to speak to this topic.
Mayor,
Yes.
I believe Becky Gilliam was on the phone. I don't hear her speaking up, but I just want you to know that literally just minutes ago, I received a letter of testimony from her, which I am forwarding as I speak. The letter of testimony is to the subject of this public hearing, and you should be receiving it at any moment. It is from the Safe Routes Schools Partnership, signed by Becky Gilliam, in specifically calling out support for 4 projects. And hopefully, again, you'll receive that as we're talking, and it will become part of the record.
Becky, I'm sorry I was on mute when I was trying to chime in. Thank you for circulating that letter with the policy committee. Again, my name is Becky Gilliam, and I work for the Safe Routes Partnership, working in Oregon to advocate for policies and regional investments for active transportation and healthy community design. As was mentioned, I have submitted testimony in support of regional projects that help improve conditions for walking and biking, expand equitable access to active transportation and public transit, improve air quality, and support safe routes to school. I do call out 4 specific projects that I'm especially excited to offer support for. The first being the City of Springfield's Walking and Biking Network Improvements Project. I guess it's actually 5. The second and third would be point-to-point Safe Routes to School Coordinator Support Project, and also their Equity Program project. The third being LCOG's Regional Safety Analysis and Programming, and the fourth being City of Eugene Smart Trips, New Movers and Mobility Options. I'm not going to read my full letter because that is before you now, but would ask that you prioritize projects in your review that will provide the maximum benefit to communities of color and low-income communities across the region. I do call out those 5 projects. However, there are many that I think are really important for supporting walking, biking, and transit in the region. But just wanted to call those out as especially really excited for those ones. So thank you for your consideration and for your support moving the region towards a safer and healthier multimodal system. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So is there anyone else that we know of that wants to give testimony now? Okay. I'll ask a question while the public hearing's still open. So this letter, will it go into the public record that we see next month when we discuss it again?
Yes, Mayor, the letter will go into the public record as submitted as part of the public hearing. In briefly looking at it, I don't see any questions in the letter that require a staff response, but we'll be careful to review it again.
Okay, great. Thank you, Paul. Okay. Well, if there's no one else that's waiting to give public testimony, then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing on this item, and then that will move forward into the 30-day public process. Yes? Okay. Okay, so B on the agenda is the LCDC report, and perhaps, Paul, was this where you wanted to do OMPOC, which I managed to miss because I put the wrong time on my calendar. Tried to log on when there was only 5 minutes left to the meeting. So anyway, I apologize to before, but to Paul and Kate that I managed to foul up my own meeting.
Mayor, if I will introduce this. What I suggest is that I introduce the context for last week's Land Conservation and Development Commission meeting. actually, I guess that was 2 weeks ago now. And then there were two people in particular that were speakers at that meeting on behalf of this MPO, yourself, Mayor, and Rob Interfeld. I'd like to turn over the presentation on the how that meeting went to the two of you. And then after we discuss the meeting itself, perhaps Kate Reed and I can fill in on OMPOC's comments on it at this past Monday's OMPOC meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. So Rob, you know, I can first just comment that in the packet is actually the testimony that both Rob and myself gave at the two LCDC. But is Rob here?
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Okay, do you want to start, Rob?
Sure. I mean, I don't know that there's really a whole lot to say. Mayor Lundberg and I stuck to our testimony pretty much straight on, and they asked us a few questions afterwards. One of them was about whether or not we were using the preferred scenario. One was around BRT. It was actually from Gerardo Sandoval, who's a commissioner, who's a professor in planning at the University of Oregon, and he asked about the connection between BRT and whether we've seen more housing development as a result of the investments in BRT and affordable housing in particular. I'm just looking at my notes as I'm speaking. You know, one thing that I would encourage people to do is to look at the executive order that the governor released. I don't know if that's been discussed in an MPC meeting before. I know that your discussion was more related to the initial letter that the governor provided, but she went into a lot more detail in her executive order in terms of exactly what she's requesting the different agencies and commissions do.
I apologize, Rob and Chair. Could you just tell me what agenda item we are on right now?
It's the second item under the MPO business, I believe.
Well,
yeah, it's the LCDC report.
Thank you. Thank you. I apologize for the interruption.
So one of the things that they talked about is that they would like to initiate rulemaking at their September meeting. And one of the things that we requested was that they start off by using the draft proposed transportation planning rule update or amendments that several of us participated in the rulemaking for a couple of years ago, because we invested a lot of time in that. They were getting ready to adopt it, and then sort of at the 11th hour, they received a letter from a Metro counselor from the Portland area, and that requested them to put it on hold, and they did that. And so it was kind of disappointing that one person was able to stop that process that a lot of us had invested time into, a lot of trips to Salem. Paul Thompson, Tom Boyott, and Kelly Clark from the MPO and myself were the ones who participated in that process. Something else we learned is that they're going to be doing more outreach to different local agencies and stakeholders to help inform how they're going to respond to the governor's executive order. So I actually got a call or an email yesterday requesting an interview. So I think they'll be reaching out to a lot of people around how are they going to move forward, or to inform the plan that they're coming up with, the work plan to address the governor's executive order. So I think it's a great time right now. There's a definite openness to doing things differently. One thing that I've expressed is that I feel like for the work that we do, a lot more of the opportunities with ODOT, because that's where the money is to actually build the projects that will enable people to make changes in terms of how they get around. Something else I've learned is that ODOT is also talking about the possibility of having new rules around how people get to work. So this is something we're looking at in the city of Eugene, but there is some discussion around, should there be statewide rules for employers to provide more incentives for people to use means other than driving alone to get to work. So that's just something else that is being talked about right now.
Okay. So I don't think I have too much more to add, because what was supposed to be a 1:15 testimony turned out to be, I want to say it was a couple hours later, or whenever that we finally got our testimony in and done. So I didn't stay for a lot of the discussion afterwards, but we did stick to script that's in the packet, and because it really did express the concerns that we have around how the process was done before, and to express what we want to see going forward, particularly around funding. That's such a big piece of, you can't expect us to do things if we have no way to pay for it. So anyway, I think I'll look to Paul. Did you were the one that sat through the whole thing? And
yes, I did. What it was supposed to be, I think, a 2-hour agenda item. It went over 4 hours.
Yeah.
So I'd like to add a few more comments if I could. First, I'd like to genuinely thank Mayor Lundberg and Rob. They did an excellent job of conveying our concerns to the commission. They were heard. They did receive some good questions and some good feedback. It was an interesting commission meeting in that I think we have a fairly new Land Conservation and Development Commission. One of the members, it was their first meeting period as a member. So they were feeling their way through some things around this. Frankly, 2 weeks ago, they almost rushed into making rules right on the spot, which would have been inappropriate. They have asked their staff to come back at their next meeting in July with some options and some responses to some things, and then they may enter rulemaking in September around this. Again, I think we were heard in terms of our desire for not as much rulemaking and planning as may have been possible, but more moving towards funding and implementation directly. Also, one of our major concerns was their ability to mandate or regulate the MPOs in any respect, but also with respect to land use. If you recall, and you may not recall, but we did let you know that back in November, when the Land Conservation and Development Commission met in November of 2019, they issued a statement that essentially said they would be requiring MPOs and local jurisdictions to take transportation and land use planning and implementation measures. Well, MPOs can't do land use work, planning or implementation. And so we have continued to mention that. And in fact, in the 4th hour of the meeting 2 weeks ago, they were talking about mandating some things of the MPOs. They were talking about mandating some things of the MPOs and requiring them by July of 2021. And fortunately, at that point, DLCD staff stepped in and reminded them that they cannot do that. So I think we are heading off that conflict or possible conflict. I will say, though, that I don't know what's going to happen, but my sense of what's going to happen based on that meeting and some follow-up conversations I've had with DLCD staff is that they are likely to enter this rulemaking that would require the local jurisdictions, cities and counties, to do planning around greenhouse gas reductions. And if they require that, there's a very good likelihood that they will strengthen what was proposed 2 years ago when that was tabled, as Rob mentioned. What was proposed 2 years ago would have essentially required consideration of greenhouse gas reductions and consideration of regional coordination to do that, regional coordination within, say, a metropolitan area. Again, I'm only projecting my own thoughts here based on what I'm hearing, but I would expect that this time the rulemaking might go further and will probably require greenhouse gas reduction planning and will probably require regional coordination. In other words, doing it on a regional basis to come up with a toolbox. Now, one of our concerns, and Mayor Lundberg, I know you spoke to this 2 weeks ago, one of our concerns has been not having a strict set of mandates that every jurisdiction within a region has to follow. I think they heard that. And in follow-up conversations I've had with DLCD staff, they said that they heard that they would be supportive of requiring regional coordination and requiring some sort of planning that comes up with a regional toolbox, but but allowing lots of flexibility for how individual jurisdictions within a region choose from that toolbox and then implement. So I think, again, we're being heard there. The last two things I'll mention. Number one, Rob mentioned that they are reaching out. Just yesterday, we sent to DLCD staff the contact information for all of the MPC members and alternates, and for the key regional transportation staff, they requested that. So they are going to be reaching out to many, if not all of you, to get your input and to schedule interviews. And then the second thing I'll mention is, as a result of the governor's executive order last year, this is a 4-state agency effort. Land Conservation, or DLCD, ODOT, DEQ, and Department of Energy. Those 4 agencies have been working on a framework, and the first sort of draft or a result of that framework is just out now. We can send a link, but if you look for Oregon Every Mile Counts, the Every Mile Counts will lead you to information about how the 4 agencies are initially proposing to move forward in this respect in a coordinated fashion. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Well, it's good to know that they were listening, at least to parts of it. Are there questions around what's going to be coming up? Because this is fairly significant in terms of how it's going to affect our planning, how we spend money or not. You know, I think between Rob and I, we must have said we don't have funding probably at least 10 times. So hopefully that sunk in, that it's hard to mandate anything and not give us any money to do it. So hopefully they'll take that into consideration, whatever they do. So maybe, are there any questions around, you know, what's happening with LCDC and the planning? It is a 4-agency undertaking here. And Joe, you had your hand up at some point, and then I didn't call on Joe Bernie.
Thank you, Mayor. I rudely interrupted. I was just trying to locate where we were on the agenda at that moment. But may I make a comment? But thank you. Yes. May I make a comment? I don't fully understand and appreciate learning all the ins and outs of some pretty basic premises I heard. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing correctly. One is to require any action if there are resources required to implement that action without resources really puts a wedge between people that are trying to do the right thing. If I hear that correctly. One is that greenhouse gas reduction is going to be planned regionally. And I think that, my opinion, that's a lot better than having mandates from on high tell us how to do the planning. In a different space, in the energy space, in a previous iteration of life, we were successful in having a state identify minimum targets for energy reduction and carbon emission reduction. But part of the criteria was that entities could determine how they were going to achieve that on their own. There was not one size fits all. That included private as well as public entities. It took the controversial issue of are we going to achieve these targets away and didn't have people divide us by telling us how we had to do it. I hope that there's application here. And the other thing that was required there, and I hope Oregon starts to think this way, is the requirement also was implementation of these activities had to require net new job creation. And since I failed to see any of these in some of these discussions, I just wanted in discussion to bring this up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay. Paul, do you know what the next steps are for what's going to happen? Because now we've given our testimony and we're in a waiting pattern, or they have other meetings they're doing, they're going to reach out. What can we expect?
At this point, the July LCDC meeting will, I think, on this topic consist primarily of the staff responding to the commission's requests for further information and options on how to enter rulemaking. So I expect the July meeting to be mostly educational for the commission, but it should also be informative to see how the commissioners respond to those options. And then we expect that in September, they will enter into rulemaking. In other words, when they initiate rulemaking as a commission, what that does, presumably in September, is direct the DLCD staff to start the rulemaking process. That presumably would result in the formation of another rulemaking advisory committee, which is essentially the same committee that, as Rob mentioned, he and I and Tom Boyette and Kelly Clark served on several years ago. So hopefully we would again be invited to serve on a rulemaking advisory committee. And from then we would proceed through, that technical exercise of how to write rules around this. And that could take some time, and we certainly would keep you informed on that.
Okay. Good deal. Okay. Yes. So keep us informed. That's for sure. Is there anything else on this particular part of the topic, the LCDC?
Mayor, yes, Kate Reed, she may want to say how OMPOC discussed this.
I was just going to say echo of thank you to both Rob and Mayor Lundberg for having their voices, our voices collectively in this venue, and just context, like a little context around it. Metro is the loudest voice typically, and we heard that from the beginning of what Rob shared and how the original rulemaking got delayed and derailed a bit, I guess. And Metro actually does have the ability to do land use because of the way that they're put together, their agency. And so I think that by having voices from both Eugene and Springfield there, two separate municipalities, other voices from OMPOC, NPC collectively, it gives this ability to have another view on this topic that isn't from an agency that has land use jurisdiction. And I think that was really important. And I heard that from OMPOC members as well, that we need that balance in our state if we're going to make any headway with any of this, because you can't just apply one thing to one agency and expect everyone else to fall in line, especially when the other agencies can't actually do the same physical rulemaking or policies. So I just wanted to say that and say thank you again. And there was a little bit of talk at NPC or at OMPOC about how I guess it was one of the people receiving information was one of their last meetings. And so there was an apology of sorts given at OMPOC about how some of the conversation went, and really was kind of towards this member that was leaving DLCD. And so that was interesting, but there wasn't a whole lot of other discussion about that. I don't know if Paul, you want to expand on that at all?
Well, what happened, and frankly, DLCD staff was somewhat apologetic during Monday's OMPOC meeting about this, and 2 weeks ago during the LCDC meeting, I was texting with several DLCD staff as the meeting was going on, and they were saying some of the same things, that one of the LCDC commissioners was at their very last meeting of their term. They've been on the commission for a number of years. The meeting 2 weeks ago was their last meeting. They no longer will be on the commission, and that they were trying to push through that immediate rulemaking. They felt this person frankly said, I might as well try and go big. It's my last meeting. And so that person was trying to push through immediate rulemaking 2 weeks ago, and that wasn't appropriate as acknowledged by DLCD staff. So that's what was conveyed later.
So did they have very specific points that they wanted to make? I'm assuming why you would want to for sure be at the table.
The the person was trying, this commissioner was trying to push through fairly rigorous mandates. This was the person that was pushing some of the discussion about mandating these things of the greenhouse gas planning and actions by MPOs as well as local jurisdictions. The discussion even got to the point where the commission was talking about, well, if we require this of MPOs, and we know MPOs are on a 4-year long-range planning cycle, we have to redo our long-range plan every 4 years. They were saying, well, what if an MPO is in year 3 or 4, and we require this by July of 2021? Are we going to make them do it all within a year? And this is at the point where, to be honest, I was texting DLCD staff, then DLCD staff then got on the line with their commissioners and said, commissioners, you can't regulate the MPOs at all. So it was just an interesting discussion that got a little far afield.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you're going to keep us well informed about what's happening, because it does impact us so very much depending on what the decisions are or where we have other opportunities to testify. So, okay. Yes, Paul.
Just one last comment. I know it's been mentioned that 2 years ago, the Metro Council, and Rob, it wasn't just one Metro Commissioner, but it was the Metro Council that submitted a letter that essentially put an end to the rulemaking that had almost wrapped up 2 years ago. I had a long virtual meeting just yesterday with Metro staff up in Portland, and we discussed this. And although it was only a staff level discussion, what they reassured me is that moving forward now with this new effort, Metro isn't looking to impose Metro's views on the rest of the state and the rest of the MPOs. And Metro isn't looking to require one solution for all the rest of the MPOs. Their main point is that they really do want the regional coordination to be required. They really feel that, to use the example here, that if Eugene and Springfield and Coburg and Lane County went about this individually, that doesn't make sense to them in the context of this being a worldwide issue. Climate change, greenhouse gases aren't confined to our UGBs. But Metro made it clear, Metro staff yesterday made it very clear that they just want to see that regional coordination requirement. They don't want to see a regional toolbox requirement. They want to see the flexibility, again, as Mayor Lumberg keeps asking for. They want to see, Metro agrees that there needs to be the flexibility for individual jurisdictions to implement in their own way. They just want to make sure that Metro just wants to make sure that regional discussions and regional coordination happen. So I'll stop there.
Okay, good deal. All right. So with that, I think we'll move along to the next item on the agenda, which is, and thank you, Kate, and thank you, Paul, for being at the, I'm probably Brenda, at the OMPOC meeting, and without me. So I appreciate that. So the next item is the safety update, and it's Drew.
Yes, and he's here. Drew?
Okay.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you. My name is Drew Beverly, and I am the coordinator for the Safe Lane Transportation Coalition. Today, I want to provide an update on current traffic safety trends, specifically reckless driving behavior during the stay-at-home order. Before I start, I want to state that I am not a public health expert, but I have done a lot of research on the topic of reckless driving, and I'm here to provide an update on national, state, and local trends over the last 3 months. Between March 19th and April 6th, 42 states issued some form of stay-at-home directive. In Oregon, on March 23rd, Governor Kate Brown issued an executive order recommending all Oregonians to stay home and avoid leaving the house as much as possible. Unsurprisingly, these stay-at-home orders had a direct impact on the nation's transportation system. Since March, there has been a noticeable drop in vehicle miles traveled. During the early phases of the stay-at-home order, household vehicle travel across the United States declined by 68 to 72%. While people are driving less, there has also been an increase in pedestrian and active transportation. More people are going outside, taking walks, riding bikes. Nationally, bike sales in March were up 39% year over year, and local bike businesses have also seen an increase in demand. For example, Hutch's Bicycle says that their sales have nearly doubled and that it has been hard to keep up with their customers' needs. That is the good news. As stay-at-home directives took effect, Americans changed their travel behavior. They took fewer trips, and the trips they did take were shorter, covered less miles, and more people got out of the house to use active transportation. However, the less congested streets and empty highways encourage some drivers to disregard speed limits and other traffic safety laws. Reckless driving has increased dramatically since March, leading to a disproportionate number of speed-related crashes and fatalities. The Governor's Highway Safety Association released an analysis of unhealthy traffic trends that have arose during stay-at-home orders. These trends include drivers frequently going 20 to 40 miles over posted speed limits. Highway patrol officers have seen an increase in the number of vehicles speeding in excess of over 100 miles per hour. Aggressive speeding in corridors and areas typically heavily congested with traffic. One example showing how drivers have disregarded traffic safety norms made the national news when 3 men drove a white sedan with extra fuel tanks from New York to Los Angeles in 26 hours and 38 minutes. They averaged more than 100 miles per hour over nearly 3,000 miles on the uncrowded highway system. Here in Oregon, law enforcement officers are seeing many drivers going 80 to 100 miles on the interstate and highways. In Portland, the number of drivers cited for driving 30 miles per hour over the limit per day had gone from single digits in February to approximately 30 in April. Nicole Charlton, ODOT Region 2 Traffic Safety Coordinator, relayed that due to the amount of speeding drivers on the interstate, law enforcement are mainly focusing on pulling over drivers that are exceeding 90 miles per hour. Officers have said that they have not had any trouble issuing citations one after another. And ODOT traffic technicians report that the worst perpetrators come out at night when it's dark. That is when they track the very high speeds. In May, a driver was cited for speeding 104 miles per hour in a posted 50 mile per hour construction zone. ODOT also indicated that it isn't just the increase in of speeding in some cases, but also an increase in distracted driving and impaired driving. In one instance in late April, Oregon State Police troopers received a report from the motorist that he had been shot at while driving on I-5. Troopers located the driver 20 miles away at a rest area. A subsequent investigation revealed that the driver was under the influence of drugs, and his paranoia led him to believe he was being shot at after his vehicle tire had blown. The driver proceeded to drive 20 miles on the interstate over the speed limit. Troopers located approximately 95 grams of marijuana in the vehicle, and he was arrested for driving under the influence. Unfortunately, with the increase of reckless driving during the stay-at-home order, it has created a situation where less people are driving, but more fatalities are happening on the roadways. The National Safety Council released data showing that in March, vehicle miles traveled were down, and the overall number of motor vehicle deaths nationwide was down, but the mileage death rate, the fatalities per 100 million miles traveled, was up 14% compared to March 2019. In April, in Lane County, there were 4 fatal crashes, one involving a person on a bike. ODOT reported in Region 2, there were 10 crash fatalities in an 8-day period between May 17th and May 24th. Why is there an increase in reckless driving? Well, the straightforward answer is that the roads are open and it gives people the room to speed. There is a collective effect that if everyone in traffic is moving faster, the individuals will drive faster, even if it's above the speed limit. Other contributing factors include people driving recklessly may be under the impression that police are not prioritizing traffic stops during the pandemic, or that police departments are operating with limited resources because officers have been reallocated onto the health crisis. Simply put, some people are doing it because they think they can get away with it. Another proposed reason for the increase is that people are dealing with the stress of isolation, economic hardships, and the fear of the unknown may find reckless driving a liberating experience. It's common to see risky behaviors pop up in stressful situations. Typically, people turn to drinking or drugs, but during the stay-at-home order, they have also turned to reckless driving. In terms of impaired driving during the stay-at-home order, there's not a lot of data or information locally I can provide, but I can report that according to OLCC, in March, statewide marijuana sales increased 38% year over year. And for alcohol sales in March, there was a 20% increase year over year. But what is interesting was there was a large shift in how the alcohol was consumed. Sales to individuals at retail stores increased 44%, while sales to bars and restaurants dropped by 53%. So not only were there more alcohol sold in March 2020, but more people were drinking at home with the added stress and the economic fallout of the stay-at-home order. What can be done? Well, to promote community safety, especially during the stay-at-home order, experts recommend to keep pushing for more enforcement and education, urging drivers to obey speed limits, even if roads are clear and the traffic is light. Certain communities are promoting the message, when you're out, social distance, wear a mask, and when you're behind the wheel, slow down. People driving also need to be aware that more people are walking and biking, so they need to be attentive while driving. People walking and biking need to remember that reduced traffic does not mean that there's no traffic, so be careful when crossing or walking in streets. We at the Safe Lane Transportation Coalition are currently coordinating with partners at Lane County and at ODOT to create an education campaign promoting safe driving and safe road user behavior during the COVID-19 health crisis. We've reached out to local law enforcement at Springfield Police Department, Eugene Police Department, and Lane County Sheriff's Office to inquire what they have seen locally and to create a campaign that addresses our local needs. We're currently in the process of making that campaign and making the messaging and getting the materials out. We're hoping to get that campaign out to the community shortly. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, great. Hey, excuse me, I'm just going to jump in here for a second. Someone on the phone, it sounds like you're in your car with your window rolled down, and I heard someone's car start earlier. If you could put your phone on mute, that would be really great. We're getting a lot of feedback. And it's someone on the phone. Well, maybe that did it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're probably driving too fast too. Sorry.
Pete, did you have a question? So you're
yes,
on
thanks.
mute too. Okay.
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for this report. I was going to say I made my first trip out of my house for any significant distance last week. And it was to and from the coast. And I would say, first of all, the speeds were very high. So anecdotally, I would say I agree. And then the other thing is in terms of the drinking, again, anecdotally, it's hard to drink at a bar when the bars are closed. So I don't think that's any big shock. It's even harder to drink at a restaurant if the restaurants are closed. So I don't think that the drinking at home versus drinking in public places is particularly a big factor at the present time, or at least, March, April, May. But I do think that driving is a big, big problem. I mean, it is dangerous. We know that that the high-speed driving kills people. And I saw this is on the internet, reports from urban areas around the country where the number of tickets above 100 miles per hour on LA County freeways was something like 10 times higher than a year earlier. So it's really out there, and I think we need to get on top of it. And I appreciate the information presented.
Okay. Are there other comments or questions about this? Okay. Well, certainly information. Oh, yes, Joe.
I apologize. I just wanted to say that while I appreciate the presentation, I find most of the statistics completely understandable, such as Commissioner Sorensen mentioned, and not as a public stance, but just privately, especially in LA. Of course, when roads don't have cars on them, young people, I was guilty of that myself, sometimes like to take advantage of that and see what their rigs can do. So I didn't see a lot of data there that caused me huge concern, is all I am trying to say. I saw data there that reinforce in an environment such as this, those kinds of measures will move in the directions that were presented. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments about this? Joe Pishner.
So I was just going to make a comment in regards to that information that was provided. And I may have missed it because there was a ton of stats that you included, but the causations of those fatal accidents, were they determined, and what level, how many or what percentage of those fatal accidents were alcohol involved versus speed, and or both?
Are you talking about the Lane County?
Yeah.
I do have the reports up if you wouldn't mind. 1 second.
If you want, just go ahead and, it may be easier just to, I'd like to read that report. If it's possible, just email it would be fine with me, and I can look at it.
Yeah, Drew, is that report, can we create a PDF of it and email it out?
Sasha shared it with me, so I will check.
I could speak to that. This is Sasha Vartanian, and we don't yet have all of the information behind those crashes in terms of what the main cause was. So that's something that will come later.
Right. So that was kind of what I was getting at, is that there's several assertions of what's happening, but I think more importantly, what's surrounding those assertions. I know that, as Joe mentioned, that, less cars, people are not going to be traveling as the speeds they normally do because they're being held back by, let's say, slower cars in front of them. So that's going to naturally increase those speeds. And having worked traffic before, yes, the higher speeds and actually the time of day, those higher speeds where those folks were cited for is very important as well. Because if you have a vehicle traveling at 100 miles per hour at 2 in the morning, the likelihood of them getting into an accident is much less than someone traveling 100 miles per hour at noon. And if they're in what roadway they were on. So if you're talking about interstate roadways, rural roads, or city travel, there's so many different factors, and the numbers that you have can paint such different pictures depending upon how it's portrayed.
I think as time goes on, we'll have more information to kind of paint a better picture. But since everything's relatively fresh, the numbers we do have are pretty broad.
Thank you.
So I do agree that I think it will be important to have some sort of a sense of, what was different. And if we can have the analysis of why the causes, I agree that you can't just talk about wrecks without talking about or speeding without talking about why people were in doing the behavior they were doing. So it'll be an interesting analysis. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we're on to follow up next steps, an ODOT update.
Good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon, everybody. This is Franny Brindle, ODOT Area Manager. Couple updates on construction. Our I-105 project is proceeding nicely. Moving both lanes of traffic to the westbound lanes, and so we could work on the eastbound lanes going over the river. The project is expected to wrap up by the end of August, just in time for school to start, so we're happy about that. And then the other big project we have in the region is our Delta Beltline project in Hamilton.
Franny?
Yeah, Franny, we lost you.
Franny, I can see your microphone is still on, but we can't hear you.
While we're waiting.
Hello?
Franny, there, you're back.
Oh, I went away?
Yes, you did. The last thing we heard was your next big project that you're working on.
Okay.
Talking about Delta.
Okay, it's Delta Beltline, and the contractor, Hamilton, is working on the bridge, putting in the bridge beams, which requires shutdown and a detour for lanes on the Beltline late at night, like after, I think it's 11:30 at night on the weekends, but they hope to get that wrapped up soon. It's a small little detour and it's been working well. The other thing I just wanted to mention before I have Bill talk about the Lane Act is that we're putting in a grant application for 2020 Safe Routes to School competitive construction grant for the Main Street at the Bob Straub Parkway area. On Main Street, we're looking to put more illumination along that. You know, we know, as you know, we're working on some signal improvements in that area on 54th Street signal. And so we decided that it was going to be important to do some upgrades to bike and peds in that area as it serves Ridgeview Elementary and Thurston High School students. So that will be promoted by ODOT for the DOT portion of the Safe Routes to School projects. And then, Bill, would you talk about the Lane Act?
Yes, I will. Good afternoon. This is Bill Johnson. The Lane Act is one of two acts that have been selected to participate in a pilot effort to develop what we call an area strategies program. It will identify the Lane Act's recommended priorities for broad categories of investments. It may help inform the OTC in terms of developing the next step. It will also identify a list of high priority projects in the Lane Act area. We're waiting for the contract to be finalized. There's a consultant that will be helping the act with this. We expect to begin work in July, and it will take 10 to 12 months to get through the process. The other thing that Franny wanted me to share with you is that the OTC just 2 days ago was able to provide a letter of support for the city of Eugene and the city of Springfield. They applied for a joint grant. They submitted a joint application for a build grant application for improvements to Franklin Boulevard. We had to scramble, the city of Eugene and ODOT, to get the project reviewed by the Mobility Advisory Committee. They like to look at potential reductions in freight carrying capacity, but we were able to get through that process. They may have to come back, the city of Eugene, later on when the design is more refined, but at least for the time being, their review was sufficient for the OTC to feel comfortable providing a letter of support. That's all for me.
Okay. Well, Bill, thank you. It's good to have that letter of support because I know that's a big, that Bill grant is very important to us, and we've certainly taken a run at this grant numerous times. So very hopeful that we put together an application with recommendations and support letters that will be successful this time. So thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda is the MTIP amendments. And so are there any questions or comments about those amendments? If not, we have next steps, and that would be, well, it says Springfield Justice Center. We'll see how that goes, or whether we're all going to be back in our living rooms for next month. But that meeting is on July 9th. And if there's nothing else for this agenda, a few of us have a cable commission meeting that needs to start here right away. So, yes, Paul.
Excuse me. If we can spare 5 more minutes, there's just a couple of quick OMPOC things I thought that I and/or Kate Reed could report on.
Sure.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, she's there. So the OMPOC agenda this past Monday included the discussion of the LCDC item that we already covered. It included a discussion about whether to hold the OMPOC summit or conference or event, whatever you want to call it, that we had been planning for this coming November. We have decided not to hold it this November for obvious reasons. Among those, though, the fact that we were hoping to partner that conference, that OMPOC conference, with the Association of Oregon Counties annual conference in November, and it doesn't look like there's any certainty about that happening either. So OMPOC decided to postpone it for a year. We're now targeting November of 2021. OMPOC also discussed a couple of things that came up during the ODOT update, which is when ODOT just informs ODOT or OMPOC about things. And the one thing I wanted to mention out of that was the Oregon Transportation Commission. First of all, I think I let you all know back in December or so that they were going to meet in July in Eugene. Obviously, that's not happening. OTC is meeting virtually. Also canceled in July is what was supposed to be the 3-state commission. Oregon, Washington, and California were supposed to hold a 3-state commission meeting here in Eugene in July. That's been postponed for a year. But the other thing that came up during Monday's discussion of ODOT items is that starting in July, the Oregon Transportation Commission will be starting to talk about funding for the next step, the one that covers the years 24 through 27. For quite some time, we have talked about how ODOT typically assumes when they make their initial funding decisions about where to direct money in the next step, that ODOT is usually very conservative. And indeed, at this point, they are proposing a assumption of a 10% reduction in federal funding for the next step. What we've often said is we would like them to be more explicit about how they will use money that may come in excess of their initial assumption, because historically, the ODOT and the OTC have planned very conservatively and then have received even more money. And that sometimes large increment of additional funding has typically not been subject to much of a process with chances for involvement by the MPOs or even the ACs. So on Monday, OMPOC approved a letter that Alcock staff is drafting for OMPOC, the OMPOC chair, to send to ODOT and the OTC, asking that instead this time, if they're going to plan on an initial assumption of a conservative reduction in federal funding, that's fine. But we're asking them to also plan now in advance on how they will explicitly use additional funding should it become available. So I just want you to know that I think we're going to make some headway on that, because when you have all of the Oregon MPOs through OMPOC signing on to that, and the OTC will receive that in their testimony in July, I'm hoping that they will respond to that, but we'll, again, keep you updated on that. Kate Reed, I don't know if you want to add anything from Monday's meeting?
Nope. The only other thing that we did on Monday was talk about just kind of like an update from each of the jurisdictions and the regions, and it sounds a lot like what we've been doing in our region and jurisdictions. So good to know that we're doing what everybody else is doing.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, if there's nothing else for the MPC agenda, I'm going to go ahead and close the MPC meeting, and then those that need to be on the Cable Commission meeting, please stay, and we'll go into the Cable Commission meeting. So I can go ahead and call that meeting to order. And I'm looking for, we need to do another approval of minutes. And do we want to, Brenda, do you want to make sure who's taking minutes here and needs to know who's on the at the meeting?
I'm keeping track of that.
Okay.
The Cable Commission are the jurisdiction of Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County. And so we need to make sure, let's see, it's the screen is shifting here. So I'm going to call roll again. Just
okay.
So we have, okay, you want to go up to the top there again? Okay, so all right. So Christine Lundberg, Pete Sorensen, Joe Pictionary, Joe Burney, Lucy Vinnis, Sam Kelly Quattrochi, Tom Boyat. And we have several callers. We have 2 callers on the phone, I would imagine. One is Ann Davies. Who's the other caller, please?
This is Sandra Bishop. I'm also just a member of the public staying for the Cable Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
So welcome. Okay, so with that, the first item on the agenda is approval of the April 2nd minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes with one edification under approval of the minutes of the last minutes. My name is misspelled, but it shouldn't be a big deal. I just make an edification for that.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's because your name is so easy to spell.
You would think. It's a simple Italian name. Come on.
Okay, so there's been a motion.
It's not lutefisk.
Yeah.
Really? Italian fish.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table. Is there a second? A motion with an amendment?
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Aye.
any opposed? No. Motion carries, minutes are approved. So the next item is the PEG grant distributions. And I'm guessing that this is where we're looking to Ann.
Yes.
Great.
And I am on the line. This is Ann Davies with Lane Council of Governments. I am staff for the Metropolitan Cable Commission, along with the jurisdictional staff. Jurisdictions provide their own staff, and I think some of those staff are on the line. Sam from Springfield, I think, is on, and I think that may be it. So every year we get money from Comcast. We get $100,000, and $50,000 of those dollars goes to Neil Moyer's program with Metro TV, and $50,000 is earmarked for what we call the PEG grant program. A number of years back, the Cable Commission decided to create this grant cycle so that we could distribute these funds to the PEG, public education and government channels. So we do that every year. Generally, it's $50,000. This year we have a bit more because we went back and realized that some funds had not been spent, some where the money was approved, but then for some reason the channel never actually spent that money. So that's been accumulating a little bit, and we have $74,000 this year instead of 50. We had initially 3 applications, one from Lane County, one from Community TV, and one from the Eugene Springfield Fire Channel. Lane County ended up withdrawing their application, so there are only those 2 applications in front of you. Eugene and Springfield Fire has requested, the numbers are in the memo, approximately $32,000 for a quite significant request for equipment. And the Community TV has requested $9,200. So staff looked at those requests, and given the amount of money that we had available, and Neil Moyer, Metro TV, is the staff person who's very familiar with what equipment is needed and how old different equipment is, and what upgrades need to happen. And as a group, we determined that we thought these requests were appropriate. So we're recommending approval of requests by those 2 channels. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I will, after we get through the PEG process, just give you some updates on some of the other issues that we've been dealing with in the last couple of months.
Okay. So any questions or comments about the PEG grant applications? No. Okay, so Ann, we need to actually approve the staff recommendation. I saw a kind of I move to approve motion in the memo. Is that our next, you want us to do that now?
Yes, yep, I have on the next steps on the second page of the memo, there's some language that you could use.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm looking for a motion, Joe or Lucy. Well, do you have questions?
No, I'm good with this. So I'll just do the motion. I move to approve the staff recommendation for distribution of the 2020 PEG grants.
Okay.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, Joe, Bernie, did you have a question?
Yes, what is happening with the remaining funds?
I'm glad you asked that, because I was going to indicate that during my presentation, and then I was realized I hadn't said it, and I was going to do it after your vote, but I can do it now. So LCC used to have a channel, and that channel is being transferred to the U of O. So Neil Moyer at Metro TV is working with U of O folks to basically transfer that LCC channel to the U of O. It's kind of ongoing right now, so they were not really ready to submit an application for equipment this round, but they will be next year or before next year. And so what we decided to do is we decided to take that leftover money that had not been requested and hold on to it possibly for that U of O channel when they get up and running and need to get a whole bunch of new equipment. Our suggestion is not necessarily that you earmark it for that, because there may be other needs out there, but definitely we wanted to hold on to some money for any needs that might come up for the U of O channel.
So if may I follow up, Chair?
Yes. Yes.
So if I hear you correctly, it sounds like you're saying, 1, money can accrue forward. 2, staff are deciding and working on a proposal with an entity. And 3, there's only one time we're bound only one time annually to give out those funds. And if I'm hearing you correct, my only concern there is that during this really unusual time in our history, I am on the receiving end of so many community groups requesting mechanisms to communicate with others. And I just don't know if there's an overlap here or not, but I'm just concerned with what I heard out of the response to my question, given those 3 points. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, so just answering, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask you, Ann, if you have a response.
Yeah. So the one thing I did want to mention is the question about it being a one-time-a-year event where we distribute these funds. In the past, the Cable Commission has indicated that it's usually in the spring, so April, May, June is when we usually do this distribution. Because the U of O channel missed this round, we had talked about whether we were going to suggest that maybe we do an interim cycle or we do an earlier cycle. And that's certainly something we can look at. I do want to mention that in the next 5 or 6 months, we are planning to come back to you, and this was something I was going to mention, because of some issues that came up during this grant cycle and the lack of clarity in the criteria and application about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. We want to spend some time in the next 5 or 6 months coming up with some way of streamlining this a little bit and presenting that for you for approval prior to the next cycle.
Okay. Is that enough information, Joe, for you?
It's the information she has, so my answer would be yes. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Okay. So there was a motion and a second on the table. So I'm going to look for all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. So motion carries. And then Anne, you said you had a couple of other updates you wanted to give us.
Yeah, and I a couple of them I just wove into that presentation, but I did want to remind you that their efforts are ongoing to finalize the extension of the franchise. It was due to expire in June of 2020, and I think you decided this a couple of months ago that we would be extending that until December of 2021. So the jurisdictions are trying to finalize the paperwork on that with Comcast. And then with regard to the status of the FCC order, which somewhat dovetails with why we're getting extension on the franchise renewal, is that there's nothing new has happened with the FCC order. It's in litigation. The parties are going to be briefing the court challenge to that, and we probably won't see anything until 2021. So we are all kind of on hold waiting for answers on that, but not anticipating anything coming down anytime soon. So that's where we're on hold on all of that. And that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions or any other comments for the Cable Commission? Yes, Lucy.
I'm just curious about that. If the court decision comes down in 2021 and we have a change in administration, we could conceivably have a change in the FCC composition, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So it might change, the landscape might look very different by the time this decision comes down.
That's possible. It may take some time to unravel some of the issues that have been issued during this administration. So we just kind of have to wait and see. But definitely the landscape could be changing if the makeup of the FCC changes.
Well, that would be good. Thank you.
Pete.
Thank you. Yeah, my understanding is the FTC is governed by the commissioners, and there are, I believe, 5. I was about to look it up. 5 FTC commissioners, and they are on staggered terms. So I'm not sure that the change in administration, if there is one, is going to change the FTC. And maybe the next time we meet, Ms. Davies, you can look into that bit of detail, maybe a Wikipedia level research on how many seats there are and when they come up. But I think that I think it's 3 or 5. I think it was expanded from 3 to 5, but and in Small World Department, one of Senator Morse's aides was the last time an Oregonian was on the FTC.
So interesting question, because I did get some information recently from the NATOA group. Is a call that I get in on every so often, and the information that I have on that is that it's five people. When the administration comes in, when the administration turns over, generally what happens is the chair of the commission steps down. Not just down, doesn't stay on the commission, but basically steps down and leaves. And a new chair that is the party of the administration then steps in as chair. There were questions whether that would happen, because there's not any rule or statute or requirement that it happened that way. It's just kind of how it's always been done. So what's supposed to happen is that the FCC then becomes 3-2 the other way. So it should change the landscape. Whether the Chairman Pai will refuse to step down, we don't know that.
Okay, Pete.
Again, just the current Wikipedia level research I have is that the current chair's term expires 2024. There is a 2023 Republican nominee who expires 2023. There's one for 2022, a Democratic nominee, Ms. Slaughter, and Ms. Wilson, Republican nominee, her term expires 2025. So there's a lot of stability in the commission. That's why a lot of positions do get changed pretty rapidly, and quite a policy shift. You know, a new DOT secretary, new attorney general, whatever. But I think FTC is a pretty stable organization. Anyway, thanks a lot. And let's vote for change in the fall.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions or comments for the Cable Commission? Okay. Well, thank you, Anne, very much for the reports. And with that, I'm going to close the Cable Commission meeting, and I believe that's all that we had to do here. So,
any other recommendations? Any other recommendations for elections?
Okay, you two can be offline for that. Okay, all right.
Just checking, make sure what kind of form we have here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, I'm getting off this call. Okay. Bye.